Hey there, Bible nerds. Welcome back to Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye, where we dive into the Bible chapter by chapter. Today we're covering Numbers chapters 26 through 30, and trust me, we've got everything from a giant head count and 5 feisty sisters changing inheritance laws to a divine party planning guide with so many sacrifices and some rules about keeping your word. It's a lot, but stick with me. I'll keep it fun, casual, and maybe even mildly educational. So grab your drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. Today I have coffee and my body armor. My soundboard is actually ever since I got a new computer a couple weeks ago. Good job, baby. I got a new computer a couple weeks ago, and I don't know why for some reason my soundboard is not working on this one. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do that to work it with my new computer. Anyways, chapter 26. So our story picks up after the plague. So Israel just survived a nasty plague. Now they're camped on the plains of Moab by the Jordan, across from Jericho, gearing up to finally enter the promised land. But first, God tells Moses and Eleazar, Aaron's son, now the high priest, to take a census of all Israelite men age 20 and up. So, those able to go to war. Think of it like a massive roll call of military draft registration, ancient Israel style. Census 2.0. Moses and Eleazar go tribe by tribe, family by family, counting the new generation. Oh, sorry. If you recall, the original Exodus generation, except faithful few, was doomed to die in the wilderness for their lack of faith. Now their kids are grown up, and it's their turn to be counted as Israel's fighting force. They start with Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. Reuben's clan numbers 43,730. In the listing, there's a spicy footnote reminding us about good job. Reubenite troublemakers, Dathan and Abiram. So those guys who joined Korah's rebellion against Moses and got swallowed by the earth as a divine smackdown, if you remember that. And the text literally says the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up. They became a warning. All right, so talk about leaving an impression. So, fortunately, some of their kin survived. Notably, the sons of Korah did not die. So, Korah's family line lived on. And plot twist, his descendants later wrote some Psalms, some of the book of Psalms, but that's another story. Next up, Simeon. Now here's a dramatic twist. Simeon's count comes to just 22,000. That's way down from their 59,000 plus 40 years earlier. So that's about 63% drop, the biggest loss of any tribe. Maybe the Simeonites had a really rough time in the wilderness. Bible scholars think the recent plague might have hit them hard since, a Simeonite leader was involved in that scandal at Peor. So on the bright side, Judah is still going strong with 76,500 men, remaining the largest tribe. Some tribes even grew, like Manasseh exploded to 52,700. They increased about 64% from before. The biggest gain of all. So Manasseh was clearly eating their manna Wheaties. In contrast, our cousins Ephraim shrank by 20% to 32,500. Every tribe has its story, but overall the nation's size is almost unchanged from the first census. Pretty much a statistical deja vu. In fact, Moses tallies the grand total to 601,730 men of fighting age. The first census back at Sinai was 603,550, which is, not that far of a difference. So Israel's net change is negative 1,820 people. So that's not really a lot. That's like 0.3% less. So they spent 40 years wandering and ended up basically the same size, because 1,000 is not really, just under 2,000 is not a huge difference. So talk about running in place, literally. It's like the entire nation hit the pause button on population growth. A whole generation died off and was replaced almost one for one. Some might call that stagnation, but hey, considering plagues, wars, wilderness life, staying stable is kind of miraculous. God kept his promise to Abraham. My neck hurts. I think I slept funny. But anyway, so Israel is still strong, surviving all the drama. During the census roll call, there's a noteworthy cameo. So I'm going to try not to butcher this. Zelophehad's daughter. In the tribe of Manasseh's count, we find Zelophehad, descendant of Manasseh, had no sons, only 5 daughters, and they're all named Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. I like that name, Tirzah. So yeah, one of them is named Noah, not Theo or guy. Apparently Noah was a unisex name before it was cool. It's a pretty cool one. Noah. I think I like that for a girl. Noah. So these, yes, Babs. Okay. These 5 women get a special shout out in the census list because dad had no sons to carry on his name. So file that away. These ladies are about to make biblical history or herstory in the next chapter. After counting the tribes, God gives Moses instruction on dividing the promised land once they get there. The rule, bigger tribes get bigger slices of land once they get there. Yeah, once they get there. And then smaller tribes get smaller slices. That kind of makes sense, right? Proportionate to their numbers. It has to be fair and equal and proportionate to their numbers. To me, that sounds fair, but to keep things ultimately in God's hands, the specific land portions will be assigned by lot. Think sacred random lots, kind of like drawing straws guided by God. So it's a mix of practical and providential. The population decides the size of your inheritance, but God decides where it is by lottery. They also count the Levites, the priestly tribe, separately. Levites weren't included in the main census since they don't go to war or get territory like the others. Their number comes to 23,000 males, but they counted males from 1 month old and up, since Levites are dedicated from infancy. We get a mini family tree of Levi, which are clans of Gershon, Kohath, Merari, etc. And even a reminder that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam were Levites, children of Amram and Jochebed. They note Aaron's sons and how Nadab and Abihu died for offering unauthorized fire earlier. Never a dull moment. Anyway, Levites get no land inheritance because, as God had said, I am their inheritance. They'll live scattered in towns among the tribes and depend on offerings. Different setup, different purpose. Finally, Moses and Eleazar review the census result, and it hits home. Not one man from the old generation is on the list. The text is explicit of those counted 40 years ago. in the Sinai census. Um, there was not one of them left except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. All the rest had perished in the wilderness, as the Lord swore, because of their unbelief. Um, it's a clean slate. An entirely new Israel is poised to enter Canaan, led by, you guessed it, the two surviving heroes of faith, Caleb and Joshua. If this were a movie, the camera would pan to these two grizzled old timer among a sea of millennials. The OGs who kept the faith. What's funny actually is that I just there's this YouTube series about Exodus, well, about pretty much this about Moses and Aaron while they're at Mount Sinai. So the show is called The Promised Land. It's kind of like a funny um funny series about that, and Caleb and Joshua are definitely in that show. They're kind of like funny, and they're not representing um really what Caleb and Joshua is in in the book. In here they're kind of like goofy and funny and all that. Anyways, I just watched the whole series last week because there's only like 6 episodes, I think. Anyways, fun fact corner. The book we're in is called Numbers for a reason, and here we see why. So in Hebrew, this book is actually titled Bemidbar, meaning in the wilderness, but English name, Numbers, highlights the consensus and what numbers. The total in both the first and second census was around 600,000 fighting men plus women and kids. If you include everyone, we're talking like 2 million-ish people camping out with Moses. Imagine the logistics. And I've talked about this from the last thing as well, census. It's like managing Greater Seattle on a camping trip. Also, nerdy stat time. Israel's army only shrank by 1,820 men over 40 years. That's basically no change, almost miraculous given all the attrition. Scholars note how Simeon's tribe dwindled by a whopping 63%, perhaps due to the plague, while Manasseh grew 64%. But here's the kicker. Joshua and Caleb were literally the only 2 names present in both census. They outlived everyone else from the Exodus generation. Ultimate survivor champions. It fulfills God's promise that none of the faithless would enter the land except these 2 faithful spies. So if you're looking for life goals, be a Joshua or Caleb. Those guys were the real MVPs of the wilderness era. All right, chapter 27. So this chapter opens with a scene that could be straight out of feel-good legal drama. Remember those 5 daughters of Zelophehad we met in the census? There's Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. They're back and they've got an issue to raise. Picture these 5 women marching up to Moses, Eleazar, the priest, the chiefs, basically the whole leadership assembly at the tabernacle entrance. This is highly unusual in ancient Israel. You didn't often see women taking the mic in front of the whole community, but these sisters are on a mission. They say, look, our father died in the wilderness. He wasn't part of Korah's rebellion or any big mutiny, just died in his own sin, and he left no sons. In that culture, inheritance, land usually passed from father to son. No sons meant dad's name and family line might disappear, and his land portion would be assigned elsewhere, leaving the daughters with nothing. The sisters ask a daring question: why should our father's name vanish from his clan just because he had no sons? Give us property among our father's brothers. Um, so basically, please don't leave us landless just because we're daughters. They're asking for the right to inherit their dad's share of the promised land. Bold request for that time. Moses is like, good point, ladies. Instead of winging it, Moses takes this case to God. Great leadership move, as always. And guess what? God rules in favor of the sisters. The Lord tells Moses, the daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall indeed give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers. In other words, give those girls their dad's share. Mhm. Okay. Not only that, God uses this moment to establish a general inheritance law for Israel's future. If a man dies with no son, his inheritance goes to his daughter. If no daughter, then to his brother. If no brothers, to his parental uncles. If no uncles, then to the nearest relative in the clan. Oh, that's hard. This becomes a standing law in Israel. Like, how cool is that? Five gutsy women step up, and God essentially says they speak rightly and amends the rules to provide the situation for theirs, for situation like theirs. It's like the ancient version of winning a supreme court case that sets precedent. The daughters of Zelophehad basically becomes champions for women's rights in the Bible. So high five, sisters! I talk to them on my, because right now I'm covering women of the Bible on my short Bible study, so I might cover these five sisters on my next one. Um, Anyways, so side note, we'll later see in Numbers chapter 36 that there's a caveat added. The women who inherit land must marry within their tribe, so the land doesn't transfer to another tribe at Jubilee. But that's a story for another day. For now, it's a big win for Team Daughters. So no sooner has Moses handled that business, God calls him for a personal meeting. The Lord says to Moses, go up the mountain of the Abiram range and take a look at the land I'm giving the Israelite. After you've seen it, you too will be gathered to your people, just like your brother Aaron was. Oh, this part is very bittersweet. More on the bitter side, though, I think. Well, not really bitter, but it's a very, very bittersweet. So, translation, Moses climbs this mountain and get a glimpse of Canaan because you're about to die. So that's pretty much what God said. So this might sound a bit abrupt, but Moses knew this was coming. God reminds him it's because he disobeyed at the waters of Meribah and failed to uphold God's holiness before the people. So, he's not able to go to the promised land, but God gave him a chance to get a glimpse of it. Yeah. So, remember, anyways. So now put yourself in Moses' sandals. You've led these people 40 plus years. You're told you see the finish line, but not cross it. A lesser man might have begged salt or rage at this news, but Moses doesn't do any of that. Instead, his immediate response is a prayer for the people's future, saying, Lord, please anoint a leader over the community, someone who will guide them so that the Lord's congregation will be like sheep without a shepherd. So Moses, upon hearing of his impending death, is chiefly concerned that the people not be left leaderless. So no selfish complaining. He's not like his people, the Israel people. His heart is on his flock. Jesus himself later used that sheep without a shepherd image, and even he was moved with compassion by it. Moses here sets the gold standard for caring leadership. God answers Moses' request immediately. Take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Joshua is the guy. No surprise to us. We've seen Joshua distinguished as Moses' right-hand man for years. He was Moses' aide on Mount Sinai, the general who led Israel to victory against Amalek, one of the two faithful spies who trusted God against the majority report. And he's been shadowing Moses like an apprentice, prophet, general, all this time. More importantly, God says Joshua has the Spirit in him. Side note, Joshua in Hebrew is Yehoshua. Yehoshua. Same name that would become Jesus, like Yeshua in Greek, meaning the Lord is salvation. Pretty fitting for someone who will lead God's people in the promised land. So God instructs Moses to set up a formal commission name. Have Joshua stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole congregation. Commission him in their sight. Give him some of your authority so the people will obey him. Moses is to lay a hand on Joshua, a symbolic act of transferring leadership. God also knows a new procedure. Unlike Moses, who spoke with God directly, Joshua will inquire of God through Eleazar using the Urim, which is a divine Lot's method the high priest used. So Joshua will lead, but with priestly support for seeking God's decisions. It's a team leadership model, prophet, general, and priest working in tandem. Moses, ever obedient, does exactly as commanded. He takes Joshua before the people, lays hand on him, and commissions him following God's word. Imagine the ceremony. Moses, the legendary leader, publicly endorsing Joshua as the next guy. The whole camp is watching this passing of the torch. It's both solemn and hopeful. Moses isn't leaving them adrift. God already provided a new shepherd for the sheep. If this were a podcast episode, it is, we would cue the inspirational music here. But of course, my sound board is not working. I mean, I don't do a lot of music stuff in between stuff anyways, but so I digress. In one chapter, we have a landmark legal decision benefiting daughters and a leadership succession plan for Israel's future. Not bad for a day's work in the wilderness. This coffee is still very hot. Fun fact corner. Here's an interesting tidbit. Zelophehad's daughters are mentioned 4 times in the Bible. So here, Numbers 27, again in Numbers 36, then Joshua 17, and First Chronicles 7. They're pretty memorable, and their names even have meanings. For example, Tirzah means delight. Milcah means queen. And Noah, again, the girl Noah, means motion or rest. Also, ever heard of the book of Joshua? Yeah, it's named after the very man we see commissioned here. Joshua will go on to lead Israel in conquering Canaan. Fun linguistic fact: I already said this earlier, but Joshua. Wait, I lost my train of thought. Joshua's Hebrew name, which is Yehoshua, is essentially the same as Jesus, which is Yeshua in the New Testament, both meaning the Lord is salvation. So, of course, 2 very different roles. Joshua saves by military conquest. Jesus saves by the cross. But it's a neat connection. Lastly, about that Mount Abarim. God told Moses to climb. It includes Mount Nebo, which Deuteronomy chapter 34 identifies as the same exact spot Moses viewed the promised land before he died. Today, you can actually visit Mount Nebo in Jordan. There's a lookout where tradition says Moses stood. Imagine seeing the panorama Moses saw. The Jordan Valley, Jericho's plains, maybe a glimpse of Jerusalem's hills on a clear day. It's one of the history's great, so close yet so far moments. Bittersweet, very bittersweet, but at least Moses got the VIP view of Canaan. Um, yeah. Anyways, chapter 28. Switching gears. Chapter 28 and 29 are like God's official festival calendar and sacrificial checklist handed to the new generation. Think of it as God telling Israel, all right, when you're in the land, here's how you're gonna worship me regularly, day by day, week by week, month by month, and at all the yearly festivals. It's detailed, but behind all these instructions is an emphasis. Keep God at the center of your schedule and remember Him at all times, not just occasionally. So, if chapter 20 were a segment of Food Network, it'd be called Barbecue Worship, the ultimate sacrifice schedule. Vegetarians, fair warning, lots of animal offerings ahead, but it meant life and devotion back then. Moses relays God's commands for a whole suite of offerings, so let me break it down in digestible bites. Okay, number one, daily offerings. Every single day, the community must offer 2 lambs as burnt offerings, one in the morning and one at twilight, which is evening. Each lamb is offered with a grain offering and a drink offering to accompany it. This is a continual burnt offering that started back at Sinai and now continues perpetually. So every day begins and ends with worship. A lamb on the altar at dawn and another at sundown, like, bookends of daily life. Number 2, Sabbath offerings. Weekly. This is weekly. Every Sabbath day, which is Saturday, on top of the regular daily lambs, they must offer 2 extra lambs with grain and drink offerings. So on Sabbath, it's double lambs in the morning and double in the evening. The idea, the Sabbath being a holy day of rest, gets an extra level of sacrifice, a special acknowledgement of God's provision during the week. Number 3, monthly. Every new moon, or monthly offerings or new moon offerings. At the start of each month, marked by the new moon, there's a mini festival. God says, on the first day of every month, offer 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs as burnt offerings, each with the appropriate grain and drink offering proportional to their size. Also, sacrifice 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement. These are to be offered in addition to the daily offerings. Number 4, annual festivals, spring cycle. Now, God reviews the special feast that happens throughout the year with their special offerings. First up, Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the spring. Passover is on the 14th day of the first month in the biblical calendar. Interestingly, here it just briefly notes the date and says it's the Lord's Passover, but doesn't describe sacrifices beyond the traditional Passover lamb, which each household already does. The emphasis moves to the next day, starting 15th of that month. The Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts 7 days. For 7 days, they eat no leavened bread, only flat bread, remembering the haste of the Exodus and each of those days. Yeah, and guess what? There are sacrificial offerings to present. 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs, with grain and drink offerings, every day for 7 days, plus a goat for sin offering each day. In addition to the regular daily lambs that are still going on, yeah, that's a whole lot of sacrificing. A lot. So to recap, over that week, they'd offer a total of 14 bulls, 7 rams, 49 lambs, and 7 goats, not counting daily lambs. The first and 7th day of this feast were Sabbaths, but the middle days they could work, still sacrifice happened each day. Number 5, Feast of Weeks, Pentecost. Fast forward 50 days after Passover season around early summer, they celebrate the Feast of Weeks called Shavuot, or later known by Greek name Pentecost. It's a harvest festival for the first fruit of the wheat harvest and the commemoration of God's law given at Sinai in Jewish tradition. On that single day, they have a holy gathering and do not work. The offerings, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs as burnt offerings, and 1 goat for a sin offering. Essentially, the Feast of Weeks sacrifices are the same quantities as a new moon or each unleavened bread day. So 2 bulls, 1 ram, plus 7 lambs, plus 1 goat for that day. In addition, Leviticus mentions they'd wave 2 loaves of bread and offer other communal offerings, but Numbers keeps it to the basics of the burnt and sin offering. It's a day of thanksgiving for the harvest. Wow. So chapter 28 lays out, devotion, weekly Sabbath devotion, monthly fresh starts, and the major spring festivals. The key theme, regular, structured worship. God is basically programming into Israel's calendar constant reminders of who he is and what he's done. And they do need constant reminders because these people, I swear, Anyways, so no Israelite could say, gee, I forgot about God, because every day some sacrifice is happening, and throughout the year there are multiple big feasts to reset their focus. It's like God built in a season of spiritual renewal and daily habits of prayer. One more thing to note, all these sacrifices assume Israel will be in the land, settled, farming and herding, so they'll have ample animals, grain, and wine to offer. In the wilderness, doing all this was probably not fully possible long term. They had some animals, but not farming. This is forward-looking, hopeful sign that, you will enter Canaan and prosper there. Enough to afford these offerings. It's actually encouraging. God is painting a picture of an abundant future where his people are giving back out of their plenty. Okay, fun fact corner. So ready for some numbers about these numbers? If you total up all the community sacrifices God commands for a given year, you get daily 730 lambs a year to each day, plus about 730 gallons of flour and a good supply of wine and oil, morning and evening grain and drink offerings. So weekly Sabbaths, 52 weeks, add 104 extra lambs. Monthly new moons, there's 12 months, bring 24 bulls, 12 lambs, 12 rams, 84 lambs, and 12 goats annually just for the new moon. And then for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that's 7 days. So there's 14 bulls, 7 rams, 49 lambs, 7 goats total. And then for the Feast of Weeks, there's 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, 1 goat. We'll cover the fall feast in a second. Add it up, you see thousands of sacrifices each year. That's like a river of blood and a mountain of ashes. Sin and thankfulness were taken seriously. Modern folks might say, isn't that excessive? But each sacrifice was a vivid object lesson of devotion and atonement. Here's another fun tidbit. The phrase, a pleasing aroma to the Lord, appears repeatedly in this chapter and Leviticus. So, no, it's not that God loves the smell of barbecue like we do at summer cookouts. It's anthropomorphic language, meaning God was spiritually pleased with the sincere worship and the obedience of his people. The aroma symbolizes our offering and repentance and praise rising to heaven. So next time you catch a whiff of a grill and think, smells good, imagine offering your life in such a way that it smells good to God. One more fact. All of these rituals assumed Israel would have abundant flocks and crops. It was an act of faith to even receive these commands. And at that moment, they hadn't entered Canaan yet, but he was already setting expectations for blessings. It's like God saying, I know you'll have enough to do this continually. So, spoiler, when Israel got lazy or idolatrous later, these daily offerings lapsed and prophets would call them out. But during their best times, the system kept the nation spiritually grounded. It's a good reminder that consistency is in small things is as important as big annual events. All are part of the rhythm of relationship with God. All right, chapter 29. Continuing the festival lineup, this chapter focuses on high holidays of the seventh month, kind of the fall holiday season for Israel. So if chapter 28 was Spring Festival, chapter 29 is all about the autumn feast, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the grand finale, the Feast of Tabernacles. These all happen in the seventh month, which roughly corresponds to, fall time frame. September, October. So let's unpack each. So Feast of Trumpets, first day of the seventh month. This is basically Israel's civil New Year day. Later called Rosh Hashanah, meaning head of the year. On this day, they hold a sacred assembly, do no regular work, and spend the day blowing trumpets. It's like a joyful alarm clock for the soul, and it also heralds the upcoming solemn day of atonement. For offerings, the numbers prescribes as a pleasing aroma. Offer one young bull, one ram, and 7 lambs, all without defects as burnt offering, each with its grain, oil, and drink offerings, plus 1 male goat as a sin offering. So it's kind of like the same as usual. Interestingly, this is in addition to the regular monthly new moon offerings for that day and the daily offerings. So Feast of Trumpets is on the first of the month. So normally that day they'd already do 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, plus goat for the new moon. God specifically says these festival sacrifices don't replace the usual ones. They're additional. So on that one day, they'd offer the monthly quota and festival quota. Translation: Feast of the Trumpets equals 3 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 2 goats. It's a lot. Then we have the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the seventh month. This is a very solemn day. These days, Jews call it Yom Kippur. It's a fast day. The text says, "You shall afflict your souls," which means fasting and repentance, basically. No work is done. It's all about acknowledging and atoning for the sins of the whole nation. Leviticus 16 gives a detailed ritual with the high priest entering the Holy of Holies, scapegoat, etc. But here in Numbers, we get the additional burnt offering for that day. Just like trumpets, the sacrifices listed are 1 young bull, 1 ram, and the 7 lambs, and 1 goat for sin offering. So basically, on the Day of Atonement, the priest does the whole sin offering ritual, and the community presents the numbers, 29 menu of 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, and 1 goat for sin offering. So it's a heavy day, spiritually speaking. The people are fasting, praying, crying out in repentance, while the priest makes atonement in the Holy of the Holies. Wow. Then we have the Feast of Tabernacle, 15th to 21st day of the 7th month, plus an extra 8th day assembly. Now this one is the biggest batch of the year. It's called Sukkot or Sukkot. I don't know how to say that in Hebrew, or Feast of Booths, because people lived in temporary booths or tents for the week to remember their wilderness journey. It's also a harvest Thanksgiving, the final gathering of produce. Think of it as grand fall festival camp out with a spiritual twist. The Bible calls it the Feast of the Lord, and it was joyous that, later scriptures simply refer to it as the feast, implying it's the festival par excellence. For 7 days, there's a sacred assembly of the first day, and on the eighth day, they'll work on those bookends. And each of the 7 days, the sacrifices are huge and have a unique twist. The number of bulls offered decreased each day. Day one of tabernacle, they had to offer 17 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. Day two, it's go down to 12 bulls from 13, 2 rams, and then 14 lambs, 1 goat. Day three, 11 bulls. So same rams, same lambs, same goats, and so on. Each day, one less bull than the day before. And by day seven, you have 7 bulls, 7 rams, 14 lambs, 1 goat. So if you add up the bulls, 13 plus 12 plus 11 plus 10 plus 9 plus 8 plus 7 equals 70 bulls total over the week. There's a traditional Jewish idea that those 70 bulls were offered on behalf of the 70 nation of the world, symbolically covering all people. Interesting thought. Each day also had the 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat, which stayed constant. That 14 lambs detail stands out. Double perfection, maybe to symbolize complete joy or complete devotion. Essentially, the altar was loaded with offerings all week long. That was a lot. So to put it in perspective, during Tabernacle Week, tens of thousands of Israelites would gather in Jerusalem in later times, living in makeshift booths made of branches. It was like a gigantic outdoor camping worship festival. Imagine a mashup of Thanksgiving, a week-long church conference, and a camping trip. There'd be music, waving of palm branches, feasting, and rejoicing before God. Deuteronomy says, "You shall rejoice in your feast," and they did. And with 70 bulls and 98 lambs and 14 rams and 7 goats offered in 1 week, you can bet the priests were super busy, and the barbecue smell was probably so intense and so good. The chapter ends by summarizing that these offerings are in addition to any personal vows or free will offerings an individual might also give, because individuals could still bring their own sacrifices, but these here were the baseline community offerings required. Moses communicates all these instructions to the Israelites, ensuring the next generation has the full roadmap for worship in the land. Okay, fun fact corner. Feast of Trumpets today is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Traditions include dipping apples in honey for a sweet New Year, and yes, lots of shofar blowing, the trumpet. The biblical Feast of Trumpets didn't have apples and honey explicitly, but who doesn't love a good snack with their celebration, right? So, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, remains the holiest day in Judaism. Even non-religious Jews might fast on this day. One interesting tradition that developed much later in the Kol Nidre prayer on the eve of Yom Kippur, where worshippers corporately annul any rash vows they made to God during the year, sort of cleaning the slate of promises. Moreover, in ancient times, when the priests or the high priest finished the atonement ritual and came out of the sanctuary alive, it said the people would cheer. Their sins were atoned. Well, that's pretty much it for my fun fact corner. All right, chapter 30. So after the buffet of sacrifices, this chapter zooms into a very specific topic. Vows. A vow in biblical terms is a solemn promise to God, like, God, if you do X, I'll do Y, or simply, I dedicate such and such to you. Think of it as a sacred pledge, kind of like making a contract with God by your words. The law already said you must not break your oaths, but here Moses gives the new generation a refresher with some particular focus on family situations. First, the rule in general: if a man makes a vow or a binding oath to the Lord, he must not break his word. He shall do everything he promised. In short, a man's word is his bond, especially when the word is a promise to God. No pinky swear across my heart and then fingers crossed behind the back. God expects you to follow through, even if it hurts. And Psalm 15, Psalm 15 echoes this, describing the righteous person as one who keeps his oath even when it hurts. So men, speak with integrity and don't make careless vows because God will hold you to it. Now, the chapter interestingly spends most verses on scenarios with women making vows and how those vows can be affirmed or nullified depending on their household authority, father or husband. Remember, this is a patriarchal society, not to mention issues of legal responsibilities and protection. Here's how it breaks down. Young unmarried women at home. If a young woman still living in her father's house makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by an oath and her father hears about it, if dad is okay with it, he holds his peace. Then her vow stands. She's bound to it. But if dad says nope, when he hears it, if the dad disapproves when he hears it, then her vow is voided right then and there, and the Lord forgives her for not fulfilling it. Because it's as if the vow never counted thanks to dad's veto. Essentially, Pops has veto power over a daughter's vows, presumably to prevent rash or harmful pledges. Think about a teenager promising something extreme. The father can intervene. Like, my daughter promised what? Like, she's not doing that. And God's cool with the cancellation in that case. Married woman. If a woman makes a vow while married or gets married after making a vow, the husband now has the similar authority. When he hears about her vow, he has a decision window. If he says nothing in response, basically tacit approval, then her vow stands and she must do it. If hubby hears it and on the same day goes, absolutely not, I forbid this, then the vow is nullified and she's forgiven by God for not keeping it. One nuance, if the husband doesn't say anything initially, thus letting the vow stand, but later tries to cancel it after some time, he will bear the consequence, guilt for it. So husbands, you snooze, you lose. You can't retroactively veto. Better speak up fast or forever hold your peace. All right, for widows and divorced women. So if a woman is not under a father's or husband's authority because she's widowed or divorced, any vow she makes stands fully. There's no one to override it, and she's personally accountable to keep it, just like a man would be. So, interestingly, in the case of single adult women, the law treated them as responsible agents of their vows, no different from men. I like that. The chapter emphasizes that if the men in these scenarios, father or husband, let the vow stand initially by silence, then the vow is binding. If they nullify promptly, then it's not binding and the Lord will forgive her. It also notes the husband's responsibility. If he avoids a vow late, he shall bear her iniquity, implying he takes on the guilt of breaking that vow because he prevented it after the fact. In short, it's, speak up or forever hold your peace, as I've said earlier. Why all this detail? Well, vows were a big deal, which they should still be up to this day, honestly. And the social structure was such that a father or husband was seen as the spiritual head responsible for the household. This law provided a balance between honoring a woman's spiritual choices and ensuring family unity and protection. It prevented, say, a scenario where a zealous person might make a wild vow that impacts the whole family's well-being without the husband's head consent. Without the household head's consent. If dad or husband felt the vow was unwise or whatever, he could cancel it and everyone could move on. But if he agreed or kept silent, then the vow became a family commitment in a sense. Let's imagine a modern analogy to get it. Suppose a 16-year-old girl in a very devout family vows I'm going to fast for 30 days for God. Noble. But dad finds out and knows that's not healthy. He intervenes like, sweetie, I appreciate your heart, but you're not doing that. So vow canceled. Now you eat dinner. The girl is off the hook. Actually, better, not physically harmed by an extreme fast. And God doesn't hold it against her because her authority nullified her. It. Or say a wife in ancient Israel might vow, like, I will donate this much of my harvest to the tabernacle without checking with hubby. If the husband can't afford that, he might nix it to protect the family from hardship. If he thinks it's fine, he lets it stand. The system prevented a lot of domestic conflict and folly, I suspect. It's important to know this isn't about men being holier. It's about the chain of responsibility in that culture. In our day, this might sound odd or unfair. Why can a man cancel, or why can a man cancel a woman's vow, but not vice versa? So, but remember, Israelite women often had less independence in legal and economic matters. This law was as much about protecting them as controlling them. What else? It gave a young woman an out if she made a naive promise. But a man can also make naive promises as well. So, anyways, dad could rescue her from it, or husband could rescue them from it. And it ensured the husband and wife were on the same page about serious spiritual commitments, with the husband bearing the final responsibility, which in theory should make him careful and compassionate. After laying out these stipulations, the chapter ends stating these are the commands the Lord gave Moses regarding these matters of vows between a man and his wife, and a father and his young daughter at home. So communication and accountability are the themes here. All right, fun fact corner. Have you ever heard of a guy named Jephthah in Judges 11? He infamously made a rash vow that if God gave him victory in battle, he'd sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house on his return. Tragically, his daughter ran out to greet him, and that vow led to a heartbreaking outcome. Many scholars and readers ponder, like, couldn't he have just not done it? According to the law, Jephthah should have known he could appeal or something, but the story suggests he felt unbreakably bound. Some say this shows how seriously vows were taken, even foolish ones. For, like I said earlier, men can make foolish vows as well. But anyways, some say this shows how. Well, wait, already. So for the record, Jephthah could have availed himself of Leviticus 27 redemption rules, or simply confessed his foolish vow, but he didn't. It's a narrative of tragedy that likely served as a caution. Don't make stupid vows. Another example, Hannah. Hannah in First Samuel made a vow that if God gave her a son, she dedicated him to the Lord's service. I don't really find that foolish, really, because Samuel ended up serving God anyways. So, anyways, so she kept her vow when she had her son, bringing him to serve at the tabernacle. Interestingly, Hannah was married, and her husband Elkanah apparently supported her vow. The text says he gave his approval for her to do as she saw fit. So there's a case where a husband affirmed his wife's vow, and they fully or fulfilled it together. It turned out beautifully. Samuel became a great prophet. So that wasn't really very foolish, I think. And she was still able to see him. I mean, they didn't live together anymore, but like to see what he became. Speaking of modern practices, Jews to this day have a strong cultural memory of the seriousness of vows. The Kol Nidre means all vows. Prayer I mentioned is chanted in synagogues at the start of Yom Kippur, essentially asking God to nullify any unkept vows, oaths from the past year, not as a loophole for lying, but as an acknowledgement that humans fail and seeking mercy for any broken promises. It's hauntingly beautiful music, actually. It shows not even that even now. That's enough, baby, okay? Go have a drink. The echo of, don't mess with vows remains. And to connect a dot, Jesus criticized some religious leaders, specifically in Mark 7, who, instead of caring for parents, declared their resources to dodge responsibility. That's another abuse of vows. Using a vow as an excuse do not do good. The heart of God's law in Numbers 30 wasn't to enable selfishness, but to promote honesty and thoughtful commitments in line with love. So yeah, if you ever spontaneously vow to donate your entire savings or something in a spiritual frenzy, remember to sleep on it or get wise counsel. Even in Numbers, we see the need for discernment with our zealous promises. Wow, what an episode. It's been 55 minutes. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. A census roll call that signaled a new dawn for Israel. 5 sisters who slayed the patriarchy and God justice. Moses gracefully handing off leadership to Joshua. A whole calendar of devotion and epic things and all of that. So what's next? Well, if you think the wilderness journey has been all counting and laws lately, buckle up. Next chapter is going to take a wild turn into action movie territory. Remember those Midianites who led Israel into scandal back in chapter 25? Let's just say payback is coming. Moses will send Israel's warriors into battle, and there will be drama, including a surprise reappearance of a certain shady prophet. It's Balaam. I'm talking about Balaam. There's going to be victory, but also controversy over how to handle the spoils. And Moses gets angry like we haven't seen in a while. So will Israel execute justice as God commanded? Will Moses keep his cool? And how will this battle set the stage for the final leg of the journey? We'll dive into all of that next episode. For now, give yourself a pat on the back for cruising through 5 chapters of Numbers with me. That was a lot. Who knew consensus and offerings and vow laws could be so engaging? So thanks for listening to Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye. I hope you had as much fun as I did retelling these ancient stories with a modern twist. Life in the wilderness was anything but boring for Israel, and we get to learn from all their ups and downs. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to tune in next time for the continuing saga. Next episode, I believe, is going to be the final episode. Yep. And yeah, and the finale is worth the wait. Until then, keep laughing and stay curious. Your millennial. This is your millennial Bible nerd host signing off. See you in the next episode.